Hi, I'm Howard Millman. From 1968 to 1980, I was the managing director of the Asolo Theatre Company. I came back in '95 to be the producing artistic director of the Asolo Theatre Company. So I've been associated with the theater in my life for about 23 years. I'm back in this building because I'm directing a play for the Banyan Theatre, which runs every summer in the Cook Theatre over here, the smaller theater. They've asked me to direct a play, so I'm back directing a play. My whole career, accidentally, so to speak, has been either saving theaters or building theaters, one or the other. That's what I did. That's what I do. I didn't set out to do that. I didn't set out to set the world on fire. But I got a huge charge out of being able to accomplish that. And so I think that would have to be the high point of my life, the fact that I was able to, in two cases, save the Asolo, and in one case, build the Jiva Theatre. But basically, I came back and we were $2 million in debt. And that was a hard nut to overcome. But the first thing I did was to take the theater back to rotating repertory. It had been out of rotating repertory. And I brought back a permanent company because I felt that this is what this community had been used to. I mean, they had 3 aberrant years when they were not doing rotating repertory. The theater really went under very quickly. So that was the first thing that we did, was to do that. Secondly, some supporters of the theater came to me and said, you know, since the film school moved out of that whole half, the other half of the building, the ballet is about to break ground on a rehearsal hall and office space. What would you think about the ballet coming in here? And you got to remember, this building is owned by Florida State University. All they wanted to know is if I could get along with their director. And we had no problem. And so basically, the deal was made, and $1 million that they were going to put into the building, they put into here, gave it to the university, and the university paid our bills with that, basically. We were at $900,000 in debt, somewhere around there. And the other half of that debt, when I arrived, I was told, after I arrived, that we were suing Burt Reynolds for $900,000. Burt Reynolds had pledged $1 million. And he was not paying the debt. He paid $100,000 of it. And we were suing him. And the interesting thing was that the university, he's one of the darlings of the university, Florida State University graduate, you know, he's an icon. They hadn't told Florida State they were doing it. So I had a discussion with Florida State, and we owed Florida State $900,000 in tuition, student tuition, which was our responsibility from past years. And I said, look, you wipe out our $900,000 debt, and I will give you the Burt Reynolds suit to do with as you see fit. Of course, what they did with the Burt Reynolds suit was to tear it up. So that's kind of how we, and then we grew the company, and then, you know, the people started coming back. I mean, I'm the mentor to the West Coast Black Theater Troupe. So, sure. I joined their board in 2006, right after I retired. And I sat and watched it for about 1.5 years, watched what was going on. And never said much. But then Nate Jacobs and I had coffee at Starbucks, and he said, I'm going to close. He said, we're out of money, I'm going to close. And I gave him the advice I just told you. I said, you can't close, because if you close, you'll never reopen. And we figured out how we could keep it open and work at the Arts Center down near the Municipal Auditorium. But we would set up our set, and then the next day we'd have to tear it all down, including the seats, and then the next day set it back up again. But then we found Christine Jennings, who did a remarkable job. So I'm still very involved with them, and I'm on the board. I was president of the board for 2 years. Michael had directed a play called Smell of the Kill at a number of theaters. He was the associate artistic director at the Syracuse Stage in those days. And I asked him to come and direct the play, and it was just at the time, I had announced my retirement like 2 years before. It was just at the time that I was, you know, looking forward toward retirement and somebody replacing me. And Michael, when I met him, I knew had all the qualities, the qualifications. I was not on the selection committee, which was a very wise move. But, you know, kind of expressed my opinion that Michael would be wonderful for this theater. My memories of Michael are going to a small diner somewhere around here on a couple of occasions and talking about whether or not he should apply for the job. He was unsure himself. And look how it turned out. I always tell this story. It happened in 1969. We were doing a production of A Flea in Her Ear, which is a wild farce. And Ebb Thomas and Brad Wallace were both on stage, and they were expecting the actor who played Mr. Tornell to arrive on stage. And he didn't show up. And Barbara Redmond and Sharon Spellman, who were playing the two young wives, were off stage. And Barbara looked at Sharon, she said, "We've got to do something." And so she said, "Well, let's get out there. What are we going to do?" "I don't know, let's get out there." They walked out on stage, and Ebb, who played the hot Spaniard in his best Spanish heat, said, "Have you seen a man named Tornell?" And Barbara looked at Sharon and they said, "No," and they left. So that's one of the classic Asolo stories. Brad Wallace retired here about the same time I did, frankly. He'd been here for 30 some odd years. His wife, Marion, was the production stage manager forever. She just left a few years ago. My funny story about that, Brad, is that he came into my office, I guess this was somewhere in the early 2000s, and he said, "You know, my mom isn't well. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a year off and go back to Alabama and help out." I said, "Sure, Brad. It's too bad." He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I was thinking of doing Inherit the Wind with you playing Drummond, which is the leading character." And he said, stopped, and he said, "I'll get back to you." So typical of any actor. And of course, he did not go away that season, because you don't walk away from roles like that, essentially. Carolyn has been with this company. She's going on her 24th season with the Asolo Company. She had worked with the company starting in 87, I think, and did 2 or 3 years with them, but was not in the company when I came back. I brought her back into the company, and that's when we met and fell in love. I took her to an Italian restaurant downtown, Bellini's, I think was the name, for pasta, not knowing that she was such a diet person. Then I was feeding her pasta. And yeah, that's how I took her to an Italian restaurant downtown, Bellini's, I think was the name, for pasta, not knowing that she was such a diet person. Then I was feeding her pasta. And yeah, that's how we met. Brad Wallace said, "Why don't you go out with Howard?" "Howard Millman?" "I don't know." Issa said, "Howard Millman wants to take you out." And she said, "Well, I guess I can go out with him one time." And that was the end. For me, I'll always have a lasting memory of the goodbye party when I retired. And the warmth in the room, the genuine feeling of togetherness, the list of my life and what happened. And a lot of people came up and spoke, some of them very funny. And my wife had been in charge of doing that the whole evening. And we had about 400 people saying goodbye, and that was amazing.